Hi everyone, my name is Sophia Reed and I learned the hard way that generosity means nothing to people who worship pride. It was my brother's wedding, a luxury event at the Grand Belmont Hotel, dripping in gold chandeliers and artificial affection. 200 guests, an orchestra and enough champagne to drown the truth. I stood near the stage holding the envelope in my hands, the deed to a fully paid $330,000 luxury apartment. It wasn't just a gift. It was a gesture. My way of saying we made it, both of us. When the MC announced my name, all eyes turned. I smiled, walked to the microphone and said, "This is for my brother, the person who stood by me when we had nothing." Gasps filled the hall when I handed him the envelope. He opened it expecting cash or some lavish joke. Then his expression changed, disbelief, then irritation. He read the words, "deed of ownership," and instead of gratitude he laughed. Not the nervous kind. The cruel kind that fills a room with quiet shame. "You bought me a condo there?" he said loudly. "Sophia, that's the cheap part of town." A few guests chuckled. Someone murmured, "At least it's fully paid." But he wasn't done. I said I wanted something in Crescent Tower, not this low-end district. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it echoed like thunder inside me. My cheeks burned, my throat tightened, but I stayed calm. Even my father looked embarrassed, not for him but for me. And his new wife, my stepmother, smirked behind her champagne flute. 200 eyes on me. 200 witnesses to my humiliation. I took a slow breath, forcing a smile. "You're right," I said softly into the mic. "You've always wanted more than you've earned." The room went silent. I walked off the stage, heels clicking against marble, and in that sound something inside me clicked too. The realization that family pride and gratitude rarely live in the same house. And by morning he'd learn what happens when you mock the hand that built your home. By sunrise the wedding hall was empty, just stray confetti, spilled wine, and silence where laughter had once been. My brother and his new bride had left for their honeymoon suite, still basking in the attention. But the night replayed in my mind like a scene I couldn't turn off. The laughter. The whispers. The moment his words, "cheap part of town," sliced through my chest like glass. I didn't cry. Not once. Humiliation has a strange way of sharpening your focus. By 7 a.m. I was on my laptop, logged into the property management system. The luxury apartment deed had never been officially transferred. Not yet. I'd waited to sign until after the ceremony. A surprise, I'd said at the time. And what a surprise it turned out to be. I clicked revoke transfer. The screen blinked once, then displayed. Ownership successfully reverted to Reed. I stared at the confirmation, calm as still water. Next I called my lawyer, David, the one who'd handled every investment I made. "Morning, Sophia," he said groggily. "Did the wedding go well?" I smiled faintly. "Let's just say it ended in education. I need you to list the apartment for sale, today." He hesitated. "That was your brother's gift." "It was my gift," I corrected. "Now it's my investment again." By noon the property was on the market. By 4 it had 2 offers above asking price. I posted nothing online. No quotes. No shade. No drama. But by evening my phone started buzzing. Messages from guests. Screenshots of my brother's Instagram story. "Thanks, sis, but we don't do charity housing," face with tears of joy. The comments were brutal. Strangers defending me before I even said a word. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because by that time tomorrow he'd find out what I'd really done. And when he did, the joke would no longer be on me. By the next afternoon the fallout had begun. Quietly, elegantly, the way I liked things handled. While my brother and his bride posed for honeymoon photos at the resort, I sat in my downtown office signing final sale documents. The luxury apartment had sold, above market value. The funds were already routed to my charities account, the Reed Foundation for Single Mothers. Fitting, I thought. Money born from arrogance funding something that actually matters. At exactly 3:47 p.m. my brother called. I let it ring twice before answering. "What the hell did you do?" he hissed. I sipped my coffee. "You'll have to be more specific." "The apartment. I went to see it and the realtor said it's on the market. You can't just." "I can," I interrupted. "Because I never transferred it. I waited, remember? I wanted it to be special." He went silent for a beat, realizing too late that his own greed had undone him. Then his voice rose, thick with disbelief. You're insane. Do you have any idea how this looks? People think I'm ungrateful. People don't think it, I said softly. They saw it. He exhaled, panicked. You embarrassed me in front of 190 guests. I almost laughed. You did that yourself. I just provided the microphone. He muttered something to his wife in the background. Something about damage control and family reputation. But I wasn't listening anymore. I'd opened my laptop, scrolling through the comments under his latest post. She gave you a home. You gave her humiliation. You just lost the best sister alive. Man, pride really is expensive, huh? The internet had turned what he thought was power into a public downfall. He tried one last jab. You'll regret this. Dad's furious. I smiled into the receiver. Good. Maybe he'll finally learn what standing by disrespect costs. Then I hung up. Because some lessons don't need yelling. They just need timing. And a signature in the right place. By the end of that week, the family group chat was on fire. I didn't need to read every message. The previews alone told me enough. Dad, you humiliated your brother in public. Stepmother, we raised you better than this. Brother, you ruined my wedding. I muted the thread. Because for once I didn't owe anyone an explanation. That night Dad called. His tone wasn't angry. It was sharp, managerial, the same one he used when lecturing subordinates at his firm. Sophia, this behavior is beneath you. You could have handled this privately. I leaned back in my chair. Like how you handled my tuition money. Privately, when you borrowed it for his startup. Silence. That was years ago, he said finally. And we're family. No, Dad. We're hierarchy. Family would have defended me at that wedding. You didn't even flinch. You made him look foolish, he snapped. He did that himself, I replied evenly. I just stopped pretending it was normal. For a moment I heard only his breathing. Then, you think you're better than us now because you have money? No, I said. Because I have self-respect. He hung up without another word. The next morning headlines started appearing. A small business magazine had picked up the story. Investor pulls property gift after public insult. Funds charity instead. By noon the foundation's donations tripled. The comments flooded in, women, men, strangers, all saying the same thing. Boundaries are powerful. Meanwhile, my brother's sponsorship deals started dissolving. His wife unfollowed me, then posted a quote about toxic relatives. I smiled. The irony was almost poetic. That evening, Emma, my niece, video called me. She looked shy, conflicted. Mom says you hate us now. Is that true? My heart softened. No, sweetheart. I don't hate you. I just stopped helping people who hurt others. She nodded slowly. So you're helping good people instead? Yes, I said, smiling through a quiet ache. Exactly that. And somehow that small understanding from a child made all the noise fade away. A week later, my father invited me to dinner. No text, no apology, just an order disguised as a gesture. Family meeting. 7 p.m. Don't make a scene this time. I went anyway. Not for reconciliation, for closure. The dining room looked exactly as it always had. Heavy curtains, polished silver, and tension thick enough to chew. My brother sat across the table, jaw clenched, pretending to scroll through his phone. His wife avoided my eyes. Dad cleared his throat. Sophia, we're here because this has gone too far. You embarrassed your family publicly. The foundation, the press, it all reflects badly on us. I laughed once, quietly. On you, you mean? His brow furrowed. That attitude is exactly the problem. I leaned forward. No, Dad. The problem was pretending everything was fine while your son humiliated his sister in front of 190 guests. And you said nothing. My brother scoffed. You just love being the victim. I turned to him, my voice steady. Victims stay quiet. I spoke up. There's a difference. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough. You've made your point. What do you want? I looked him dead in the eye. For once. Accountability. He blinked, thrown off by the calmness in my tone. You taught me that power meant control, I said slowly. But real power is restraint. I didn't ruin your reputation, your silence did. He tried to speak, but I cut him off. You want to talk about image? I just funded housing for 8 single mothers this week. That's image, that's legacy. The room fell silent. Finally, Dad sat back, shoulders sinking. You're more like your mother than I realized. I nodded. That's the best thing you've ever said to me. I stood, placed my napkin neatly on the plate and said quietly, dinner's over. But the lesson's just beginning. Then I walked out, heels echoing across the marble. Not in anger but in peace earned the hard way. 2 days later I got an email from my father's assistant. Subject line: urgent, financial review. The irony nearly made me laugh. Apparently, after my public stunt, a few of Dad's investors started asking questions. Turns out half his firm's assets were intertwined with my name. My early seed investments, my legal trademarks, even licensing fees tied to projects I'd helped fund. For years he'd called me his pride and joy when he needed money to back his ventures. Now that I'd stepped back, those same deals were collapsing. By noon, I was sitting in a conference room overlooking the city, reviewing the paperwork his lawyers sent over. They wanted me to sign a release. A neat little clause that would separate our finances and let his company survive without my name. I read it twice, then slid it back across the table. I'll sign this, I said, on one condition. The lawyer looked nervous. And that is that the press announcement names the truth, that I was the firm's primary investor, not just his daughter playing at business. He swallowed hard. That might be difficult for him. I smiled faintly. So was being laughed at by 190 people, but I managed. That evening Dad called me personally. Sophia, this isn't necessary, he said. You've made your point. No, Dad, I replied calmly. This is the point. You spent years teaching me how to build. Now you're watching what happens when I stop holding your foundation up. He went silent. Then softer, you're really done with us, aren't you? I looked out over the skyline, lights reflecting in the glass like scattered gold. I'm done being your safety net. That's different. When I hung up, I didn't feel anger or victory, just balance. Power, I realized, isn't about control or money. It's about walking away without needing the apology. And that night, as the press statement went live, crediting me as co-founder and lead investor, the world finally saw what my family never could. A month later, the dust had settled, or maybe I just stopped checking for ashes. Dad's company restructured, smaller now, quieter. He avoided interviews, retreating into a life of quiet embarrassment. My brother's influencer deals dried up, his public image labeled ungrateful rich kid. Me. I kept building. The Reed Foundation had become something real. We opened our first community workspace. Free childcare, financial training, mental health counseling. Every woman who walked through that door reminded me that strength doesn't come from being praised. It comes from being doubted and standing anyway. At the grand opening, a reporter asked, "Do you think forgiveness is part of your story?" I paused, smiling softly. "Forgiveness is peace without permission," I said. "And I already have mine." Later that evening, I stood alone on the balcony of the new center. The city glowed beneath me, not as something I conquered but as something I now belonged to. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Stopped by your event. Watched from the crowd. You've built something beautiful. Proud of you." I didn't respond right away. For years, those words would have meant everything. Now they just meant closure. I typed back one sentence. "Thank you for teaching me how to build on my own." That was the last message we exchanged. And it felt enough. When I went home, Emma, my niece, the one who'd once asked if I hated them, was drawing at my kitchen table. She looked up with a smile. "Mom says you're doing good things." I knelt beside her. "We're all doing better things now." She grinned, holding up her sketch. A big house labeled family, but under it she'd written one word in glitter pen. Respect. And in that simple drawing I saw everything I'd fought for, finally restored. A year later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I sat by my window with a cup of coffee and a blank piece of paper. For months I'd thought about writing a letter. Not to apologize, not to reopen old wounds, but to release what still lingered. At the top I wrote, "To my family, the one that taught me everything they never meant to." My hand didn't shake this time. "You taught me that silence is approval. That kindness without boundaries becomes currency. That love without respect turns into debt." I paused, watching sunlight spill across the page. "You mocked generosity, but in doing so you made me fearless with it." You showed me the danger of being small for other people's comfort. And you helped me understand something I couldn't back then, that peace isn't found in applause, it's found in walking away without bitterness. Outside, I could hear the sound of laughter from the new community center, the same one that rose from the ashes of their pride. The women there were hosting a workshop on financial independence. I'd promised to join later. I used to crave your approval, I wrote. Now I realize you were just the beginning of my story, not the author's. I folded the letter neatly and slipped it into a box labeled unsent things. It didn't need to be mailed. It had already served its purpose. Emma came running in a few minutes later, holding her sketchbook. Look, Aunt Sophia. I drew your new building. I looked down. She'd drawn the foundation with tall glass windows, and at the top she'd written, "The house that love built." My throat tightened, but my heart was calm. I pulled her close and whispered, "That's exactly what it is, sweetheart." As the sunlight touched her hair, I realized, the girl who once walked out of a wedding in silence had built something louder than any insult ever spoken. Not revenge. Not retribution. Just peace, finally earned, quietly kept.